Okay, so next we've got a task 1 chart to talk about. So we've got the amount of leisure time enjoyed by men and women of different employment status. Write a report for a university lecturer describing the information shown below. Okay, so the first thing I always tell my candidates to look at when they see their task 1, what's the date? 1998 to 1999, which tells us everything's going to be in the past tense, okay? So be careful of your tense. That's a common mistake a lot of candidates make. The second thing that you want to do is decide how you're going to divide up your information. So for a task 1, typically, your first paragraph involves your overview and kind of like your paraphrase of, describe the graph and then give an overview of the main topics. And then you've got your body 2 and body 3, which is where you talk about trend 1 and you talk about trend 2. They like you to do comparisons in the data if possible. And so the main thing is to decide how are you going to divide up the information? What are the 2 main things that you're going to talk about? So when I'm looking at this graph, the first thing I'm thinking is, okay, so we've got our first divide is male or female, okay? And I can see that we've got 3 comparisons between men and women. And then we've got 2 where it's only women. So trend 1, I think we could do a discussion of the sort of men versus women. And then in trend 2, perhaps we could just talk about the part-time or housewives. Okay, and then trend 2, that could be something to discuss. Or you could talk about the sort of like the lowest versus the highest. So you could divide it up like that if you wanted to. That might actually sort of be an easier way to do it, like the people with the most free time and then the people with the least free time. So I think that might actually be the best way to divide it up in terms of being logical about it. So I would sort of do like most free time versus least free time. Okay, and then you've got like a nice easy comparison to do. You want to be doing comparing as you're going through. You want to make sure everything's in the past tense, and then you want to check that you're correctly talking about the information. So this is how many hours of leisure time do they have per week. Okay, so we can see that people who are unemployed and retired actually have the most hours of leisure time, most free time each week, followed by housewives and people who are full-time, and then actually people who are employed part-time, women who are employed part-time actually have the least amount of free hours every week. It's kind of interesting. I guess maybe because not only are you working, but you're also, maybe doing things like, picking up children, taking kids to work, doing housework, laundry, plus working. So you actually have less free time than people who are just employed full-time. But even here, we see women who are employed full-time actually even have less free time. I don't know if this is real data or not, but I just think that's interesting. Okay, so let's take a look and see what this candidate has done. The bar chart given illustrates how many hours men and women who are different employment status enjoyed their free time in a typical week during the period of 1998, during the period between 1998 and 1999. Enjoyed their free time. It's not how much they enjoyed it. It's not a measure of did they like it or not. It's literally how many hours. So it should be the bar chart given illustrates how many hours men and women who are different employment status. How many hours of free time men and women who are different employment status enjoyed in a typical week. Okay, so in this context, enjoyed can mean happy, but enjoyed also can kind of mean like had or received. So I can say something like, oh, I enjoyed extra vacation days at my new job or something. So that's how it should be staged. Okay, so we've got a sort of paraphrase of the information, but what we're missing here is our overview. I wonder if that's going to be on the next slide. Okay, yeah, so here we've got our overview. So usually I tell candidates to put these 2 together, your sort of paraphrase plus overview together in one paragraph. So you've got that nice 3-paragraph structure. Because really you don't need to be doing more paragraphs than that in a task 1. It's only got to be around 150 words. So that means that you're doing sort of like 30 words up here, and then like 60 and 60, kind of sort of work it out. So let's take a look at the overview. Overall, it is clearly seen that people who were unemployed or retired enjoyed their leisure time the most, while the rest of the sectors, such as those who were employed full-time, employed part-time, and those who were employed as full-time, employed as part-time, and worked as housewives had lower than that. Additionally, men who were employed as part-time or housewives did not spend their leisure time at all. Oh yeah, that's true. I suppose that's one way to interpret it. There were just men who worked part-time or men who were sort of house husbands, like didn't have any free time at all. Okay, that's fair enough. Okay, so I think actually overall this is a reasonably good overview of the trend. One thing I like to sort of advise candidates to do a bit more is to sort of give me sort of like the theme of the data, like what's the sort of data theme here, which is that there is like a sort of a gender difference between how much free time you have. So you would want to say something like, you know, the data clearly illustrates a gendered divide in how much leisure time men and women received in a typical week. Okay, so this is what I mean by sort of themed general overview. Okay, so we're just talking in general terms about a gender divide. So we're saying overall, we can see there's a difference in how much leisure time men and women received. Okay, or overall, we can see that different types of employment clearly had different amounts of leisure time associated with them. So what this candidate has done is quite typical, is that they sort of list out the information from the chart rather than sort of give an overview. So, for example, they're focusing on employment. So another way that you could say it that's sort of more general and is like a better overview is something like, we can see, or rather than we, sort of, it can be seen from the chart that different types of employment had differing amounts of leisure time associated with them. Okay, so that's how you sort of give it a sort of more general overview of the information. You're sort of saying like, okay, generally what can we see from this data that is clearly telling us that different types of employment have got different amounts of leisure time, or you have different amounts of leisure time depending on, you know, what type of or what range of employment you have. Okay, so that then once you've done this, then you go into the sort of detail section. So in detail, the figures of men, the number of men who were employed full-time, unemployed, and retired stood at 43 hours, 85 hours, and 85 hours respectively, which was much higher than women in the same employment status. Okay, this is quite a reasonably good sentence. I really like the use of the word respectively. I think this is a nice way to sort of phrase a sort of more complex sentence, which is nice. In addition, the figures for people who were unemployed and retired were seen as the same at roughly 85 hours and 75. So 85 and 75 hours for both men and women. Okay, so I guess we've gone for, they're first talking about the high number of working hours. I'm trying to think what's the theme of this section. I'm looking for what was the reason they grouped this into a paragraph. You know, one of the things they want to check for in your IELTS is logical, they call logical paragraphing. What does that mean, logical paragraphing? It's like, what's the reason that you chose to put this information together? The way we're taught to write paragraphs in school and in university in the UK, each paragraph needs to have a clear central theme or topic, okay? It's not just random. each paragraph is expressing a different topic or a different point of view. So I'm thinking, what's the topic of this paragraph? They've talked about unemployed and retired, and they've talked about full-time unemployed and retired for men, and then women, and then unemployed 8,000. So the only thing I'm confused of is what is the theme or topic of this paragraph, okay, which I think is confusing for me. Furthermore, the figures of those who were working as part-time or housewives within women enjoyed approximately 40 hours and 50 hours, while the amount of free time that men spent stood at 0, which showed significantly different trends compared to women. Okay, I really like this comparison sentence. I think this is really good. I like how they give the figure and then they do the sort of like analysis of it, which is nice. So again, I'm not really sure what why this is a different paragraph to this, or what the sort of theme of it is. But they did talk about in detail. Okay, so this candidate clearly sort of understood the task. They had a good go at it. They did analyze and pick out, key trends. So I probably want to sort of give a 6 for task achievement, coherence and cohesion. There's no logical structure to how they picked out their detail points. Okay, so I would mark them down to a 5.5 for that. And I would just tell them to plan and give me a logical structure. Okay, I didn't know why you chose the detail points you did, or why you grouped them together in different paragraphs. The vocabulary I thought was very good. I would probably want to give it a 6.5 for vocabulary, and grammar I would want to give it a 6. I thought their grammar was actually I forgot that they missed out a lot of words, and their tense was slightly odd, but there were definitely some sentences I liked. For example, I liked the respectively sentence. I really liked this sentence at the end, the comparison one. So I guess maybe thinking again about the past tense, I would maybe want to mark them down to a 5.5 for that. So overall, I think a sort of a 6 for this answer is kind of like a fair representation of where this candidate is at. And this is the area I would tell them to work on. And then I would just tell them to go, what was with all the missing words? Go back and check that and ask your teacher about it. But I think the main issue is the planning and the logical cohesion. I'd have liked to see a clear reason why, a clear theme for each paragraph. So that would be my main advice to this candidate.